Hi guys, it's Mrs. Horner again. Today we're going to talk about how to create selections in Photoshop. So we've talked about this a little bit in some of your other assignments or other projects, not to a great extent though. So now we're going to kind of step back a little bit and talk about some of the basic selections that you can make using your different tools in Photoshop. And there are quite a few different tools, to be honest with you. And there are different ways to make selections. So it depends a lot on the type of object that you're trying to select as far as which tool you want to use. And that takes a little bit of trial and error to sort of figure out what you need to use just on the first try. And sometimes, honestly, I go through and I make a selection and I think, oh man, that doesn't look good. I completely deselect it and just start over. So that's kind of something that you have to do a little bit. But our selection tools are up here. Not necessarily this first tool because that's the move tool, right? But these other probably three right here. And if you've noticed, if there's a little triangle in the bottom right corner of one of your tools, and actually all of these have triangles, that means that there are other tools hidden in there. So if you click and hold it down, then you'll see those other tools, which I'm sure you've already discovered. So here's my rectangular marquee tool, and in here is elliptical and then these single row ones. And I honestly don't really use these single row ones. Maybe you'll find a use for them, but I haven't really found a use for them yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the rectangular marquee tool. So I'm just selecting that, and now all I'm going to do is click and drag. And I can make whatever size rectangle I want to make, but again, it's constrained to a rectangle. If I wanted to create a different size selection or different shape selection, I would choose a different tool. But this is the rectangular marquee tool, so that's what it's meant to do. So there I go. I just clicked and dragged it out, and I created a selection. And if you'll notice up here in your options bar, that kind of controls what kind of selection or what you're doing to the selection, I should say. This controls what selection you're making. This controls what you're doing to the selection. So normally, initially, I'm just going to deselect what I already had selected. Normally, initially, when you start with a tool, you're just going to be at this initial one, which is just making the selection. So I'm just making a selection like that. If I wanted to add to my selection, I would choose this one, and then I can add on another rectangle to that first rectangle, and I could keep doing that. If I wanted to subtract from the selection, I could do this one. Okay. Okay, and then we won't use this one a whole lot, but this one is an intersect with selection one. But let's go back to the regular old marquee tool here. So I'm going to deselect what I already had selected. Control D on a PC is to deselect. I have a Mac here in my classroom, so I get confused. So if I ever say Command, just know in your mind to translate that to Control. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a rectangular selection, and we're going to fill it with a paint color. So all I'm doing is clicking and dragging out, and now I have my rectangle selected. To fill it with a paint color, I need to come over here. This is the gradient tool, which is popped up right now, but if I click on that and hold it down, I can pop down to the paint bucket tool. I can fill that with whatever color I want. So go ahead and choose your color. I'll choose pink. So I'm going to fill that rectangle with pink, but before I can do that, I need to create a new layer. So I'm going to go down here into my layers palette, and I'm going to just click on this create new layer button, and now I have a new layer. I'm going to fill that with that pink, and now I want to deselect my selection. So I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. Okay, I want to make sure that I keep track of all of my layers and I name them properly. So this one, I'm going to call this rectangular marquee. So I know that I use the rectangular marquee to create that one. Now I need to make sure that I click back on this background image. If you want to change the name of that, that would be great. It would be a good idea. So you could just name that worksheet if you wanted to, or if you want to leave it background, that's fine. But that's the rectangular marquee. So the same thing would work if you were to choose any of these other marquee tools in here. You could use the elliptical marquee tool, and we'll use that in just a couple minutes. But you could use that to create a circle. So it would work the same way. Okay, I'll just deselect that. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to choose my magic wand tool. So we're going down just a little bit in my toolbar. Okay, so I'm going to go down to my magic wand tool. Again, I need to make sure that I'm clicked on my background image or this worksheet image. If you try to do this as you're clicked on or that while the rectangular marquee layer is activated, then you're going to run into problems. Because watch, if I click on this and I click on the background, it's going to select everything but this little rectangle that I created just because of the way that layer is set up. So I'm going to deselect that by hitting Control D, and now I'm going to make sure that I have activated my background layer, which I have. So now I'm going to just click as a way to practice using my magic wand tool. I'm going to click in that white area. Okay, great, right? Actually, I'm going to deselect that one, and I'm going to click in this cloud area, and now I'm going to create another new layer so that I'm keeping everything separate. So I'm hitting this new layer button down in the layers palette, and I'll fill that with, I don't know, maybe a color that would fit in a cloud sort of setting. So I'm still on my paint bucket tool. I'm going to use that, and I changed my foreground color to a blue that fits in, and I will fill in that layer. I don't know why it made me click it twice, but it did. Okay, so there we go. Now that is selected and filled. I'm going to Command D to deselect everything, and now I'm going to rename this layer as Magic Wand. Okay, good. Now I'm clicking back on my background again, and I am going to go back to my marquee tools. So I'm going to go to the elliptical marquee tool now. I am going to hold down Shift and click and drag, creating a circle. And I'm actually going to do this down here so that you can see it a little bit better. So I'm clicking and dragging a circle. I'm releasing my mouse button before I release Shift. Okay, holding down the Shift key as you're creating a circle constrains the proportions. So I'm going to deselect this just so you can see. But if I don't hold the Shift key down, I can make this circle whatever proportions I want. So any type of ellipse I want. Again, I'm going to deselect to get rid of that selection. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a perfect circle again. Okay, so I'm going to constrain the proportions by holding down the Shift key and clicking and dragging it out. So now I have a circle. If I want to add to that selection, again, I'm holding the Shift key to do that. I'm clicking. I see that little plus sign up there. I'm going to click to add ears to my selection. Okay, so if I try to click up here without holding down the Shift key, it deletes my selection. So I have to start all over. Okay, so holding Shift to constrain proportions, and now I'm actually holding Shift for a different purpose. It's to add to the selection. Okay, so I'm just going to click and kind of draw out those Mickey ears. This one I started creating that selection too far over, so I just hit and hold down the spacebar key, and now I can drag this circle around. And that's something that we'll talk about more later too. That's not necessarily why we're doing this worksheet, but it's a good thing to know. So that looks about good there. So I'll release my mouse button, and there we go. So now I'm going to create a new layer, and I will fill that one in. I'll make my Mickey Mouse sort of shape a different color instead of plain black, because that's kind of boring. So again, I changed my foreground color to this orange, and now I'm going back to the paint bucket tool, making sure that I'm on that new layer that I just selected or that I just created, and I'm just going to click on in that little selection with my paint bucket tool, and it will fill it in. Again, I'm going to Control D to deselect what I had just selected. Okay. The Move tool. Oh, sorry, we should rename our layer first. So I'm going to name that. Mickey Mouse because it looks like Mickey Mouse, right? Okay. So now the Move tool. You can practice using that, and you've probably used that plenty. That's just the first one on the top of your toolbar here, and you can actually move your Mickey Mouse around if you want. So just practice using the Move tool. That one's pretty, I mean, it moves things. It's not too complicated. So that's there. If you want to move around other things, you can. But getting back to making selections, now we're just going to move down. I'm going to click back on my background layer, and then we're going to use the magnetic lasso tool now. So we're going to go back up here to our toolbar, and we are going to choose the third one from the top are our lasso tools. There's the regular lasso, the polygonal, and the magnetic lasso. I always get mixed up with this word, or I don't like saying it because it sounds goofy. So there's that. So here's magnetic lasso tool. That's the one we're going to choose right now. And this one just finds differences in pixel value. So if I'm getting lot of difference, like in this one, for example, there's a big difference between the black image and the white image, so it's going to be able to find those edges pretty easily. If I was going to go to something that's pretty similar in value, and I don't really have anything here, like if I was trying to select part of this circle here, but not select the other part, it might have trouble with that because it's sort of a smooth gradient. So if you're going to use this tool, you need to have something that has a clearly defined edge. So right now, I'm just going to click on the edge of this little, it's kind of a cloud shape, part of a cloud. So I'm just going to click, and I'm going to just drag along the edge. If you want to, you can click in any spot and it'll sort of drop an anchor, but otherwise it kind of does that for you. So I just click, anytime you're making a sharp turn, you want to click to manually drop a point, which is a good idea. That way everything stays exactly where you want it to. So here, again, I'm going to click, and I'm going to come, whoops, I got a little wild there. I'm going to come right up to the top. And when I see that little circle to the bottom right of my tool, then I know that my path has been completed. So I'll click right there, and there we go. My selection has been completed. Just kind of a little side note, if you look right here where I got a little wild, what I could do, and this is a little bit more complicated than just starting out, but I'm going to take this rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to go back to that one. I'm going to choose this subtract from selection option up here. I'm going to come over here, and I can do this pretty easily because this is just a regular rectangle. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag, and I'm going to just sort of clean up the outside edge of my selection. So I'm just going to grab those, that little part of the selection that got a little wild and out of control there. So now I have a nice clean edge. So I'm back to where I want to be. So now I'm going to create a new layer again. I'll fill that layer with, let's see, a different color. Green sounds good. I'll go back to my paint bucket tool, and I'll just fill that in. Okay, this is just sort of some more information. It's just how we had talked about that little circle appearing when your path has been completed. So that's just more of that. You don't need to necessarily do anything else for this part. So now I'm going to go back over, and I'll rename this layer green cloud. Okay, you can name your layers whatever you need to, but as long as you have at least, you should have these 4 layers that have been added to this original background file. Okay, so save this as a PSD. So go to File, Save As, keep this. Yours will look a little bit different because I'm working on a Mac, but it should be fairly similar, just so you know. But save it as a Photoshop document, and then saving it to your desktop in that folder that we created is a good idea. So hit save. Oh, I had already created one, so I will save this as, I forgot, I should save this as my first name. So I'm gonna go Mrs. Horner Selection Tools.psd. That's a perfect way to name it. You put your first name here, your last name here, and then whatever project it is at the end of that. Hit save, upload that guy to our classroom. There's a spot in Classroom where you can hand that in. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And we are going to use all of these selection tools in our next project. And the next project will get sort of complicated, but if you know how to use these tools, you'll be sort of well on your way to creating a cool project there. Okay, let me know if you have questions. All right, bye.